And as the President noted, I have today submitted my resignation as Secretary of Defense. It's been the greatest privilege of my life. The greatest privilege of my life to lead.
Chuck Hagel, the outgoing Secretary of Defense, President Obama's third Secretary of Defense. And Eric, this opens up at least three storylines I can think of. First of all, the question of why he's leaving. The President said it was Chuck Hagel's idea. It's being widely reported by Bloomberg and others that the President asked Chuck Hagel to step down. Second is who comes next. There's already a short list that people are talking about. And then finally, the President's national security policy with Afghanistan news over the weekend, ISIS as an ongoing issue, as well as the Iranian issue, which is right now in John Kerry's hands, but it certainly has a military dimension. So this will be a big story coming into the new year with the new Republican Congress.
Let's start with the first point you raised. Whether he was pushed, whether he chose to walk out, the narrative that's emerging is that Chuck Hagel was at the very least marginalized, and I used the term earlier, emasculated, because that's what it sounds like, or it seems like to me, as I familiarized myself with Bloomberg's reporting. What does that say about his relationship to the President and the role of a cabinet member with that much experience and that senior?
Friend of the President from the Senate and a guy who served honorably in Vietnam, and yet there were a lot of skeptics when he got nominated. People can recall his confirmation hearing was extraordinarily bumpy. This is a guy who many people saw, many of my sources saw, as ill-suited to run the bureaucracy of the Pentagon and to play the hardball politics with the White House. Again, as I said at the top, it's a White House that really tries to centralize national security policy in the administration. Joe Biden's a big player. And I think in this case, the people who were skeptical that he was up to the job proved to be at least partially accurate.
Well, let's try to answer question number two that you raised. Peter Cook, our chief Washington correspondent, is with us from D.C. Peter, who are the potential successors to Chuck Hagel as defense secretary?
Well, I think you've got to look, first of all, at people who have served in the department previously, people who stand a decent chance of being confirmed relatively easily because they've been confirmed before. And a couple names immediately come to mind. One of them is Ashton Carter. He was the Deputy Secretary of Defense. He was bypassed in favor of Chuck Hagel for the top job. This is someone who, again, has respect both sides of the aisle. I would imagine Ash Carter would be an easy person to be confirmed. A lot of Bloomberg folks know him because he was the chief weapons buyer at the Pentagon for several years. The other name mentioned a lot is Michelle Flournoy. She was a director of policy. She stepped down as undersecretary a couple months back. She's been away from the Pentagon. Her name's been mentioned just as someone who's close to the president and close to the White House decision makers on a lot of national security issues. So in that sense, she would be closer to the inner circle than perhaps Chuck Hagel was ever able to get to reach. And don't be surprised, you're going to see some other names come up as well, but you got to consider confirmation being one of the bigger challenges right now, given the limited time remaining in this Congress and, of course, Republicans taking control in January.
There's no question, Peter's right, that it should be easier for somebody who has been confirmed to be confirmed again, but I would have to imagine in a Congress like this, all bets are off.
Well, we'll see the Republicans' general posture towards confirmation for all positions. I think Flournoy has the inside track here, not because she's just a woman, but I think the President has few opportunities to make history. There's never been a female Secretary of Defense. She is seen as supremely qualified across the board, very popular within what they call the building at the Pentagon, very strong relationship with folks in the White House. I won't say surprised if she doesn't get it, but I would make her right now the most logical candidate at a time when confirmation does matter, and she has been confirmed.
Mark, you made the point that the next defense secretary is going to have a very full plate indeed. Peter, what's at the top of the agenda?
Well, first of all, you've got instant fights right now. You've got the Islamic State. You've got, of course, U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Mark mentioned that, the changes there. This is a president still trying to wind down the U.S. involvement in Afghanistan. You've got troops in harm's way right now. But you have to put the budget right there at the near the top of the list as well. And this was something that I think Chuck Hagel was less comfortable with dealing with. He had to deal with sequestration. So will his successor. You got to deal with a Republican Congress that's got different ideas about defense spending than this president. So I think the budget's going to be a big challenge for whoever takes over this job, in addition to, of course, dealing with American troops in harm's way right now.
Does Hagel's resignation, again, we're terming it a resignation,
pending,
yes, his departure, is that a point of weakness for the president?
Well, look, there's lots the president has to deal with now. Lame duck session, Republicans taking over the Senate in January. I think it's actually a positive, given how difficult it was for Chuck Hagel to be operating on multiple levels within the administration. Just never penetrated the White House bureaucracy, the ability to smoothly function. If the president picks the right person who can reach out to the new Republican Congress and the Senate, I think he can get a little bit of a fresh start in a lot of complicated areas. And Peter hit the nail on the head in terms of the budget. That is a huge part of this job. It has been now for several decades, managing the Pentagon budget in times when defense spending is declining or staying roughly even. It's going to be a big part of this new secretary's portfolio.